stream. I'm going to go ahead and set up. Okay. All right. There we go. And the timer is going. So I'm assuming then everything is okay. Perfect. Okay. So I'm going to start the live by choosing one of the decks and asking to sort of receive a message from Venus, whose day and hour it currently is. If I'm not very much mistaken, I should, yeah. So it's still Venus hour. Good. Awesome. So that's great. So I'm going to try to start out these lives more by asking the planetary spirit or guide, whose day and hour it corresponds to give us a nice little message, just kind of whatever is relevant for everybody to hear. And I also want to take a little minute in the beginning to just let everybody know that while these lives are Patreon exclusive in that only people of the $8 tier or more are granted access to during the live, while it is live, to ask any questions that they like, whether it's about the artistic process or upcoming decks or upcoming deck projects, or literally just, questions for the tarot deck, readings basically. That's all fine. And then I think I'm going to have it so that they get exclusive access to that for a while. And then, I don't know, like a week later or something, maybe I make them public as just kind of like almost like a podcast format or something. So, only people who are subscribed to the $8 tier or more have access or are invited to the lives to participate in the lives. But I felt there's probably not much harm in allowing public like viewing afterwards. So that's just a little rundown for how that's likely going to go in the future. Okay, so Venus hour, Venus day. What does she have to say? Venus is the planet / goddess of love, beauty, pleasure, harmony, relationships, all kinds of good, beautiful Venusian stuff. Pleasure, desire, I think, as well. All right, let's see what Venus has to tell us as we wait. Oh, we've got some. Okay, that's really funny. Okay, sorry. So, and I'm also doing this thing that I haven't done in the past. Oh, good morning. Hey, glad you could make it. I'm experimenting with the wide camera screen angle, which means it's harder for me to read comments than it already is. And I don't think that it does let me zoom. Cool. Earlier today it was not letting me zoom, but I thought, well, this might look better on the Kickstarter page. Like the previews are more landscape. So I don't know much about tech orientations or whatever, but I thought I'd give it a try. Anyway, so we're filtering a message from Venus, and we have here the 5 of Swords, and that's really funny because that actually corresponds to Venus's decan of the zodiac sign Aquarius. So I'll just turn it upright so you guys can like see the imagery of the card, because obviously that's very helpful with tarot. So yeah, we have here 5 swords, a peahen, and 2 peacocks looking dejected and rejected in the background. And then this is starflower, which often, which represents like courage, bravery, also safety during travels. And this is because Aquarius is sort of the energy of like, the outsider, the pariah, the immigrant, the traveler, the outcast, the disenfranchised or marginalized. Of course, Venus is the goddess of love, beauty, pleasure, harmony, relationships. And so Venus in this, in her decan of Aquarius, tends to be like rejecting what is socially acceptable or the norm or the devil in favor of hoping to get to this better, more Venusian, more pleasurable place. So in a lot of ways, the 5 of Swords is kind of the journey of the immigrant, right? Because, you kind of leave behind all of these other things that with the hope that the devil you don't know is better than the devil you do. It takes a lot of courage, a lot of bravery, but it also does make you feel very much alone and like an outsider, right? You're looking for a truth or a beauty that is beyond what is just available to you or what is on offer. So we have the peahen is literally rejecting, 2 for sure things because she's hoping for a more idealistic or a more pure or more true kind of connection or result, right? So a lot of the times when the 5 of Swords comes up, it talks about ideological conflicts and differences. Swords are weapons, right? And the mind is very much a double-edged sword in a lot of ways, right? Picking the holes in logic and refuting, arguing over ideals or theoretical constructs, intangible things as air signs are wont to do. It doesn't oftentimes lead to a lot of harmony. And yet I think that Venus's ability here in this decan is to like look for the greater good, right? Like the more idealized good. So whatever it is that we're forsaking, whether it is a harmonious relationship with someone we know, for speaking our truth or declaring what we really think, even if it sets us at odds with everyone around us, or is it kind of against what we've been told or what we think we should want. It also has this sort of hopefulness that, like, well, ultimately, though, I'm pursuing something more beautiful, more true, more pleasurable in the long term, even though it may, temporarily set me on the outcast and on the side of the on the side of the untouchables, as it were. I often see this card when I see this card, it often refers to just getting involved in ideological conflicts, right? Like, it's not that you're enjoying the fight, but you feel that you're championing something that is more important than your immediate discomfort, right? There's a Saturnian way about enduring kind of emotional and mental strife because of like some kind of underlining ideological structure that you believe more strongly in or more firmly in. Anyway, it's reversed. So when it comes reversed, that's usually like we're really like every hill is worth dying on, right? Like we just can't let things go, or we keep rejecting, what's on offer again and again and again and again because we think there should be something better, but there isn't always, right? So this is kind of like maybe looking a gift horse in the mouth, or like maybe something isn't exactly just the way that you want it to be. And Aquarius is the fixed air sign, so we can get very fixed in our thoughts, right? Like what something should be, how it should be, that we refuse to see any of the good in what is, right? And so we reject like pretty good deals because we're like, well, I think I can do better. I think I can do better. And sometimes there is a limit to that. And it's kind of funny because the next card we got here, I'm just going to do these three because this is starting to feel like a set. And then the next card is the reverse page, or not page, reverse Queen of Swords. So there's a lot of air in there, but this feels like a good set for Venus's message to us, because the next card is the Seven of Pentacles. So the Seven of Pentacles is really fun because it's one of those cards that's like, it's so fun because it's not fun. This is the Saturn decan of Taurus, and the Saturn decan of Taurus is like about slow labor, slow treachery, just doing it because you have to, making sure you cross your T's and dot your I's. Like, we see here we've got all these gourds, which is about like longevity and endurance. And oh hey, good, I have two people. Hi. So I'm just reading Venus's message, so I'm like explaining the cards, and then if you guys want to change deck, you guys can request the Nameless One or the Children of Litha, or we can stick with Ostara if you want, and we can ask personal questions. But yes, so with the Saturnian decan of the zodiac sign Taurus, Taurus is also, by the way, ruled by Venus. So we got, staying in that Venus line, this one we got a Saturn ruled Venus decan, and this one we have a Venus ruled sign and a Saturn decan. So that's kind of exciting, because always love to see the through line and like the messages, but it's cool. Anyway, so here we have gourds are symbols of longevity and prosperity, but we also have like this early frost that clearly was not accounted for because somebody has abandoned the work midway through. 7 is pretty late in the game, so we are gaining momentum. 7 numerologically often is said to represent like the merging of heaven and earth, right? Understanding, comprehending the mechanics as they are, and trying to sort of like see the divine or bigger picture in them. And so the 7 of Pentacles is a really unpleasant Saturnian card, but it is, again, because it's within the sign of Taurus, it's for ultimate Venusian pleasure, right? And so when I see this deck, and a lot of the time it's like, well, no matter how much you plan ahead, no matter how diligently you toil and you work for, the best well-being of your crops, and you try to get all your affairs in order, and you buy the best fertilizer, you buy the best land, you make sure you have great insurance or whatever, you do everything you possibly can do that's in your power to control, there are still forces that just you will be unable to to predict and to control, right? That's like the Saturn element. Life is life. You can have this beautiful harvest, but if a frost comes early and unexpectedly, well, you're probably going to lose most of it, and there's really just nothing you can do about it. I mean, you reach a certain point where you have that Saturnian limit, right? There's a limit to how much you can possibly do to maintain and fix your pleasure. And the thing about Taurus is it's the fixed sign of Venus, right? Venus is the goddess and planet of pleasure and harmony and beauty and love and all these great things. And Saturn comes at the end of that Taurus decan to say, like, well, there's a limit, right? There's a limit to how good your crop can possibly be. There's a limit to how many mouths it can possibly feed. There's a limit to how much success you can realistically expect. And that's kind of, and then we start getting it. It's funny too, because I oftentimes will do this exercise where I'll sort of like walk through all of the zodiac signs and tell a complete story in my head. And at the point that we switch from Taurus to the first decan of Gemini, right, we've reached this Saturnian limit where we say, okay, this is what's known, and we've reached the limit of what we know we can do, of what history and context and communal wisdom have provided in Taurus. And so then we switch over to the Jupiter decan of Gemini, where we're like, let's try something new, right? Like, let's entertain all of these new options that have never been done before. Let's really think outside the box and get creative. Let's talk to people across in a different village or a different culture. Let's communicate and try to share ideas, right? Figure out, troubleshoot, like, okay, so this is the most I can get in this way. Like, how can I work around it, or how can I deal with it after the fact? So it's really fun how we go into like this earth sign where we have all of this like pleasure, and these fruits are, being grown, and everything is thriving. And then Saturn says, well, there's a limit. And then Mercury kind of comes and says, is there? I think maybe we can work around it a little bit. So it's pretty funny how these transitions, I think, kind of naturally are implemented when you think about the way that the zodiacal wheel flows. It's almost like people thought about this for a really, really long time. Like maybe 2,000 years or something. Anyway, so I always think that the seven of coins is kind of fun, because on the one hand, if you've reached a limit, you've reached a limit, right? And this is very much with this Venus decan too, being the Venus decan of Aquarius being reversed. Like, you keep hoping for better and better and better and better, but there's a limit, right? You've done all you can, and there's just nothing you can do except, I don't know, have compassion, have strength, right? Fortitude to endure, to not let that kind of like dampen your own agency, your own outlook. There are certain things, and it's just so funny because I just wrote this big old giant tirade on Patreon about strength with the Onyx Tarot, talking about how, Leo is the domicile of the sun, and the sun is the celestial sovereign, and, the sun rejoices in the ninth house. The ninth house, among many other things, represents like spirituality and religion and philosophy and astrology and all of these really high like spiritual concepts, right? And so the sun rejoicing here, I thought, it's really interesting, because ultimately all of these different faiths, all of these different spiritualities and religions kind of grapple with this concept of fate versus free will, and who really has sovereignty, right? Who really has kingship over their lives? Is it fate or God or karma or the individual, or some weird combination of all of them? And Leo is the space for the sun, right? And the sun is like this celestial, literally Leo is fixed fire. The only fixed fire that literally never disappears from human awareness or consciousness is like the sun. You know what I mean? It's there every day. And love him or hate him, he's always there. And he's always very visible. And not only is he visible, he makes everything around him visible, right? It's because of his light that we can know the world around us, that our eyes have evolved the way that they have to accept light and shadow and shape and form and all these other things, and like understand, what that is, right? So so Leo is a very visual space, because the sun, is domicile, is strongest there. And the sun is one of his most obvious traits, is that he's incredibly difficult to ignore. Not only is he difficult to ignore, it's very unwise to ignore him, because you got to know how to plan your day, right? You have to know what time of the season the day is at its longest and when it's at its shortest, so that you can like plant your crops and like expect the best, and not be like, well, I'll wait tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, and then the winters come and you're fucked, right? Like, you have to know what he is signifying, right? And so it's very much like the celestial king, right? You have to know what your kings are saying is going to happen. And it's also interesting because a lot of kingship is performance, right? Is going out, speaking to the masses, telling people this is how it's going to be, and hoping that they respect your authority enough to actually listen to you. And one of my favorite sayings is, a king is only as powerful as his subjects are loyal, right? Ultimately, even though he might not like to envision this, right? He is, in a way, subservient to his own power, right? He has to keep it fed, keep it fixed. And so Leo is this space where you can do that. But Leo is also, the sun is about identity and ego as well as leaders. And we are the leaders of ourselves, right? Ultimately, whatever we do, whether we comply with social norms or we don't, or we try or we don't, or whatever, like we are the ones who make those decisions day to day to day. So, anyway, this is all to say. Sometimes in life things don't go as you plan. It can't be as beautiful as you want. You don't get the kind of results you want, and you've done everything you can. And you have to just remember that, like, regardless of what happens around you, you have the strength to endure, and you are the sovereign of yourself. You get to tell yourself, if it's going to be okay or not. You get to tell yourself if how you're going to respond and what the plan is. Just recently I was thinking too, I've been having these little fits of stress, and then I have these little fits of like indulgence to cope with it. And so I was like gonna try to maybe eat my third popsicle in like an hour. And then I was like, wait a second. If my children were like, hey, mom, can I have a third popsicle in an hour? I'd be like, no, of course not. It's not good for you. Why would I let you do that? And I was like, I should probably try to rule myself and closer to a manner as I rule my children. I think I might be a lot like a less tyrannical, weird, erratic dictator if I thought of it that way. But it's funny, right? Because it's like this is essentially one of many, right? One of many kind of core situations that strength as a tarot card brings to the table is this wrestling with different parts of yourself, like your beastly urges to devour whatever you want and to be the tyrant king and to just think that you're in control of all of life and you don't have to worry about anything else and it's all about you all the time. And then this sort of like higher, more divine calling, right? Understanding that, like, yes, you are a sovereign over yourself and you can make that choice, but there are consequences for every choice. Some consequences you don't have control over, right? Some consequences you will ultimately just be forced to bear. So it's really fun to get this as like, this is a very kind of it's Venusian, right? Because we have the Venus decan of Saturn's Aquarius, and then we have the Saturn decan of Venus's Taurus, and then we have this kind of like juxtaposition between like the pursuit of pleasure and ideals and the confrontation of reality and what's actually possible, and then how you manage yourself, kind of mediating these two forces, right? Like the best that I can get, the best that I deserve, the best that I can realistically expect based on the effort that I've put into it. And this is another thing too, right? Like Taurus and Leo are both fixed signs, and actually they all are. Taurus, Leo, and Aquarius, I just noticed, these are all fixed signs that we have indicated here, which is really fun because when we get, that's another way to look at tarot, right? When you get a spread and you notice, oh, all of these are fixed energies, then you think, maybe I need to be a little bit more flexible. Maybe there's something here, and so then you think, okay, well, this isn't going to change and it's upright, so it's not inclined to. This is a thing that is probably, it's a major arcana card, so it's going to be like a work in progress, right? A big theme that we're dealing with for the course of however long. And then this card is reversed. So this is the one that needs to be balanced out, right? So the idea of managing our ideal realities with what is realistically attainable, best case situation, worst case situation in a realistic lens, right? Not like panicky spiral, ridiculous worst case scenarios that are very unlikely to happen, and not like crazy idealistic glory, like, oh, well, I'm just going to win the lottery and marry the richest woman in America and be set for life, right? Like, not that, and also not everyone's going to die from a meteor in 6 seconds that nobody predicts, right? So it's some kind of like balance between those extremes. And part of being fixed is being able to hit a rhythm that is sustainable, right? It's not just about being stubborn, it's about being able to endure. And something that is able to endure is able to do so because it's stable. The sun is the sun is the sun, and we're very lucky that he's as stable as he is. You know what I mean? So this is the message from Venus, right? Is don't expect too much, don't expect too little, and love yourself all the while, right? And understand that you have the power to control yourself, to lead yourself, to rule yourself, and you also have the power to love yourself and be kind to yourself, right? You can choose to be a tyrant king or an enlightened monarch. You can try to do what's best for yourself and the people around you, or you can just like lash out like a little baby, like that's your choice. Anyway. So Curry says, because I come from tomorrow on Saturn day. That's right, you're bringing the Saturn to us, totally. Okay, yeah, I was like, this is so, like, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because Venus usually is not so serious. But I'm kind of curious to look at the astrology because I have been doing bad about that. I haven't done it right now. So let's see what's going on. Well, we have Saturn and Aries in the second here, because right now my chart from where I'm at is a Pisces rising. So we have the North Node basically on the ascendant, pretty close to the ascendant, and the Wheel of Fortune, the Lot of Fortune there. So that puts Saturn in the second. We've got Venus and Gemini like on the IC in the fourth, which is cool because we're talking about Venus in like this private secret meeting. So that's kind of fun. And then we have Jupiter all by his lonesome in exaltation in the fifth, which is like not too bad. To be Jupiter and in your exaltation in the fifth, even alone, is pretty cool. And then the Sun and Mercury and the Moon all in the sixth, all in Leo. So we have a lot of this coming through, a lot of stuff in Leo right now. And then Mars in Virgo, which is making this lovely little opposition to our to where we are right now. So that's kind of fun. Anyway, so yeah. Okay, so let's see. Later, which is nice for strength too. Yeah, totally. Okay, so does anybody have a deck that they'd like to switch to, or a specific question they'd like to ask? Since we've that's what Venus wants to say. Venus wants to say, like, go easy on yourself, love yourself, you know, hit a rhythm that is like pleasurable and sustainable, and also like don't reject the good in pursuit of the perfect. That never goes well. Us Venus and Virgos really struggle with that, so thank you, Venus. But yeah, but it's true, right? Like, because ideals are one thing but reality is another. And it's interesting too because Aquarius is all the air signs have to deal with like social elements, right? And even though Aquarius is, I would say, probably the least social of the air signs, being ruled by Saturn, it's almost, I don't know. I think Austin Coppock once said, I think it was in a lecture, or maybe I'm not sure actually where, but I know he said this. But he was talking about how Aquarius is actually very social in that, like, when you hate people, you know, when you're, what's that word, like misanthropic or whatever, you're still very socially aware, right? You're aware of how much they tick you off. You're aware of being on the outside. You're aware of like not, you know, of feeling like a limit or a restriction and like how close you can be to somebody. It's not like you're totally oblivious to everything else that's going on. It's that Aquarius finds themselves antithetical to what's going on, the opposite or the outside of what's going on. But they're very much aware that it is, being an air sign makes you, I think, a bit social. Yeah, thanks, Venus. Exactly. So yeah, if nobody's got any specific questions or requests for decks, I could switch over to Litha. We haven't used Litha in a while. Or I could keep using Ostara, which, I don't know, I feel like I haven't used Litha in a really long time, but I could continue asking general questions to different, I mean, Jupiter's got the rising of the chart. It's not his hour or his day, but we could ask what he's up to. He might answer. I don't know. Okay, so one time, a long time ago, I used to do these, like, let's just see what the tarot says for now. And then you guys can just drop a question or a deck request change at any point if you want. Totally fine. Yes, Litha. Okay, great. Yeah, so I used to do these like Instagram lives, and at first they were Monday Moon Day lives, which was really cool because they almost always ended up being about like what we need to feel nurtured, what we need to like work through in our childhood, or like our past traumas, and like what that says about how we're feeling and all this stuff. And that would be, you know, expected for the Moon's Day, right? Monday is the Moon's Day. And then I decided, like, maybe I should see, like, what other planetary day influences would be in my tarot reading. So I started doing them on a Tuesday, which is Mars's day. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't be diplomatic and ask what Mars thinks, because it's all about what pisses you off and why are you angry and, like, why are you so mad? And I'm like, you know, definitely there's a place for social media that takes advantage of, like, rage fuel. But I did not feel comfortable being one of those spaces. So I was like, oh, sorry, Mars. And then I've done it on Mercury days before, but the problem is Mercury days are very, well, I do them, you know, on Patreon, we do Mercury's Day. They can be very insightful, but it can be pretty erratic, which I think is to be expected for Mercury, especially when he's retrograde, dude. Every time Mercury retrograde, Mercury's Day, something fucking happens, and I like can't, you know, log in right away, or the computer goes weird, or I forget what words are. Like, something always happens. Question, how to find your passion again? Oh, that's a good question. Okay, so Goofy Oli Noli wants to know how to find passion again. Actually, that might, depending on the types of passion, I don't know, that might be a question for Mars. But anyway, okay, how do we find the passion again? Okay, well, we got some jumpers. Okay. Of these ones, we're gonna mini shuffle because I was like, this is a lot. I'll look through them all because I can't resist. I'm very curious, but what are the most relevant here? Let's pair down. Okay, the reverse Knight of Pentacles, the Three of Wands, and Temperance. So I'm gonna just like, I am gonna look through all of these guys and we'll do like a speed run because that's fun to do. But let's start with these guys because I think we've got a lot to work with here. So we already see 2 fire cards, which is very encouraging because in tarot, fire corresponds to passion, drive, ambition, motivation. We would expect to see fire cards in a question like, how do I get my passion back? Let me make sure I don't miss out on the comments. Like personal passion. Ooh. Pressing questions. Can I ask what Saturn thinks too? I really want to be his friend. Yeah. Love the question for passion. Great. Okay, yes. So we'll do Saturn. What Saturn thinks next. So say what Saturn thinks just in general, or if you have a specific question for him, that's fun. I like asking the gods questions. Anyways, so this is something that's interesting. So we have the reverse Knight of Pentacles. And this is, if we're asking about the kind of personal passion I think we're asking about, then this card makes a lot of sense. So the Knight of Pentacles is somebody who does something the tried and true method every time, all the time. It's an Earth Knight. Knights are problem solvers. When we think about what a knight does, what his role is, or what his or her role is, it's somebody who goes and solves quests, who does things, accomplishes missions at the behest of somebody else. It's usually somebody with more social authority or, in the pursuit of glory or grandeur or any, number of things. But right, they go out and they solve a problem. They save the princess. They kill the dragon. They, they find the grail, whatever it is, that's like their role. And so we filter that then through the elements. This is an Earth Knight, so he's solving a material problem, a problem of the body, a problem of routine, money, work, right? Some kind of like tangible thing. It's really funny though, because if we're talking about like corporeal, like sexual passions, then like solving the problem of like getting excited again, right? Or like having a lot of fun again, or like sexual fulfillment or gratification. Because even though water and fire have a lot to do with emotions, particularly water being like relationships, love, emotional connection, earth is body, right? And body is not nothing. So oftentimes when the Knight of Pentacles is reversed, this is somebody who's tired, who's doing something the same way 1,000 times and expecting a different result and is getting kind of frustrated by it. Maybe somebody who like is a little bit stuck in their ways or is afraid to branch out or experiment or try something new or step outside of their comfort zone. So having the reverse Knight of Pentacles, like sometimes I think this is somebody who's so stuck in their routine and like how it's been that they just kind of can't like see it any other way. They can't break out of that and try something new. And then it's really funny that we get, of course, the Three of Wands here because it's like the how do you fix that? Try something new, right? Like start a new journey, start a new adventure, start something, kind of wild and free and fun and not thinking about how it's going to end necessarily, but just the true feeling of it. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself because we're going to talk a little bit about this first of all. In the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, the Esoteric Association, or I should say the esoteric title for the Three of Wands is called the Lord of Virtue. And this also happens to correspond to So I need some water. My throat gets so dry all of a sudden these days. Anyway, sorry. It corresponds to the sun's decan of the zodiac sign Aries. The sun is exalted in Aries. This is the middle of the decan. So Aries is a very fast cardinal energy. So we talked about fixed before, right? It wants to maintain and endure. Well, cardinal is like a big, huge explosion, a spark of force that like gets things going and off the ground. It takes a huge amount of energy to get something off the ground, whatever it is. A lot of passion, a lot of desire has to be there for it to break that initial barrier and like manifest into reality, which is kind of what Aries is all about. And so the sun being there, it's the fixed part of Aries, right? There's no, Aries is cardinal, but it's like the most We need to maintain this drive long enough to get this thing off the ground. That's kind of what this decan is concerned about. The sun is also exalted in Aries because it's like closer to the source, right? Aries is exactly shooting off the cuff, or whatever that expression is. So it's not being tampered or changed or beholden to anything or anyone. It is what it is, what it is, what it is, and it's not changing for anybody, right? That's part of being ruled by Mars. I think you just kind of do what you want, especially if it puts you in conflict with other people. I mean, the conflict, the better, right? If you're ruled by Mars, maybe so. But anyway, and so it's called the Lord of Virtue because it's like, okay, so in the Mars ruled decan of Aries, which is the first decan of the first sign, we're only concerned with like conquering, right? Going out and doing the thing, getting it off the ground, going after what you want. And when we come to this middle decan, we're now concerned with like, okay, so now if we have what we want, or if we're pursuing what we want to do it virtuously, right? We want to do it right. We want to be a good, enlightened monarch, not a tyrant king, ideally, and the sun is very powerful. And so it's nice to have that big punchy kick. But a lot of time this comes to like, the sun is the individual, is like the leader, the leading wolf in this pack, right? He's charting the course. He's letting everyone know, like, this is me, hear me roar, I'm doing what I want. So oftentimes when I see the 3 of Wands, it is about starting a new journey, starting a new adventure according to what you want, right? Like letting your passions, your desires, your instincts lead the way. And being kind of like beholden to none, right? Following exactly what you want because you want it, and not getting bogged down with like the why of it. And then we have this nice little Temperance card here, right? Which is a major arcana card. So it's going to be a bigger, more purveying issue, I should say. Like it's going to take a lot longer to, whenever I see major arcana cards come up, I'm always like, okay, so this is like a theme, right? This is a theme that you're dealing with, like a divine energy that you have to, work with. It's a lesson. It's a karmic thing. It's kind of pervasive all the time. It's not any one necessary like moment. When we see minors, a lot of the times they do indicate specific moments in your journey or trajectory, right? Like this is the moment you decide to go off and chart your own course and do what you want. Or like abdicate for yourselves, howl out your needs, or whatever it is that is, relevant in this context. But when we get major cards, this is like, okay, so this is a theme that's going to show up again and again and again. And until we learn to work with it, it's not probably going to change and go into some other thing. So for Temperance, this is, Sagittarius. Temperance corresponds to all of the zodiac signs Sagittarius. And Sagittarius is Jupiter ruled, and it's about synthesis. It's about synthesis, but also temperance, like to temper steel, right? So if you have something excessively hot and something super cold, you combine them and you get like a perfect middle ground, right? Exactly what you need it to be. Also, synthesis is being the art of taking two different things and combining them so that their strengths are enhanced and their weaknesses are mitigated. Jupiter is also, the planet of mirth and luck and goodwill and abundance, growth, spiritual growth, and also literal, like wealth, bodily growth, all of the kinds of growth. Jupiter is about faith, about mirth, miracles, all kinds of good stuff, philosophy as well, the nobles, the learned, right, wise people, things. And so in Sagittarius, this is like his diurnal expression. It's direct, it's forthright. It's like, I'm going to go and take my philosophies and beliefs to the other. And Sagittarius is, it is the archer, right? We're like shooting for the moon, right? Shooting arrows into the sunset, like the most ideal and the best kind of thing. And, all things are possible if we just figure out the right combination. In a very mundane kind of like literal way, I often see temperance as an indication that like, look, it's not that any one of these parts is bad or wrong. It's that the ratio is not balanced, right? The ratio isn't right. So let's pretend for a minute you're a centaur. There's like a very specific ratio where the man-horse combo is going to actually help you. If you have like if you split a man and a horse exactly down the middle, and you put like the head and the arms, and then you just have like a horse butt, that's not going to be as helpful, I think, as like the traditional centaur that has like the full body momentum of the horse, and then like the cognitive abilities and the finger dexterity of man. You have to get these components exactly right for us to even suspend disbelief that this ridiculous creature is going to actually be powerful and awe-inspiring and like lead us to greater visions of like mythic pasts or futures or whatever the fuck. So Sagittarius is very much about getting those ratios correct, right? You want to be hopeful and faithful and like zealous and passionate, but you don't want to overdo it. Jupiter is a benefic, which means he creates situations that are conducive to life. Generally speaking, situations that we enjoy. And no matter how good a thing is, if you overdo it, it doesn't stay good. You know what I mean? And the same thing about, it sucks to be deficient, but sometimes you need a little bit of restraint to make things go just right. So this could be about like going off and pursuing your own thing, or like trying to experiment, or branch outside of the comfort zone, right? Obviously, what's been happening, the way that we've been trying to solve our problems, it may have worked in the past, are not really working now. We're feeling stuck and stagnant. So we need to venture forth, explore new avenues, and also like literally this is a wolf howling, right? As the sun is either rising or setting. So it's like, tell people what you want and need and expect, but also like temperance, right? Like not too forcefully, but not not with what's the word? Not like docile, right? We're not going for docile, and we're not going for dominating. We're going for like insistent, like firm but fair. you know so I'm going to go through some of these other cards because I think they might be helpful, but I also want to take a minute to read the comments, and because I'm trying this landscape thing, I gotta tilt my head weird. So for the next question, for discipline, kind of like how to do Saturn remediation according to Saturn, who isn't doing the best right now. That's true. Curry, that's a good point because, yeah, Saturn's in fall right now. I don't know. It's interesting because there's so many like metaphors, right, about planets being kings and stuff, or like very personable, very people-like. They have these like very human situations. And when you're like talking to somebody who's already kind of inclined to be grumpy, and he's like in just the worst house that he hates, and it's surrounded by shit he's bad at doing, and he's like all grumpy trying to figure it out, and then you're like, ring ring, by the way, how do I fix this issue? And I can just imagine Saturn is this grumpy old man like surrounded by some kind of war zone or gym or something very, Aries like, being like, shut the fuck up, I don't have time for this. Like, I can't, the music's too fucking loud, I can't hear anything. Anyway, that's like the visual that came to my mind, is just Saturn being like, I don't have time for these problems. I got my own problems right now. But we'll ask him. We'll see what he says. That'll be really fun. Okay, so Temperance. She's been stacking me lately. I prefer her over the Nine of Swords. Oh, yes. Oh, and that's actually really interesting contextual information because Temperance following you, that's cool. First of all, it's just cool because it's actually very helpful when cards follow you because they make a point of being known, right? So you're like, you can't not deal with me. I'm here. Like, you got to do it. And having a lot of the Nine of Swords is probably the thing that needs to be tempered, right? Which is this like excessive mental spiraling and like thinking about it a lot. This is interesting too because the reverse knight, the reverse Knight of Pentacles. Sometimes I visualize this knight as being stuck in the mire of like material reality and just like can't get going. And I think a lot of the times when we are physically stuck, it's because we are mentally overactive, right? We become like paralyzed by, I don't know, theories or fear or what ifs or, possible situations. Like, I love to talk about the Nine of Swords, but so it's interesting to see that. And we'll look at this other stack that you got too, but I asked the deck to narrow it down. So I was like, what's the most relevant things to touch on here? And so it's kind of cool that you got Temperance in my reading since it's been following you, because that like very much kind of, enforces the fact that whatever this is saying needs to be balanced has not been balanced yet. It's, hopefully we can be made aware of what that is going into the future. We'll look at the other cards too, but stalking, not stacking. Either way, right? It's been stacking the readings every time, or it's been stalking you through the readings. I think both work. Okay, so let's look at some of these other cards. We'll just do like a quick run. So here's some mental energy. We got the 8 of freaking swords. Like what tool is this? The 8 of air, the 8 air one. Anyway. So, sorry, I need more water again. Okay. So this card is reversed, which is actually kind of nice because it means like there's going to be a breakthrough soon. Like you've been really trapped and stuck in your thoughts for a really long time, and there's going to be like a release, which is good. I think that indicates that, whatever you've been mulling over or dealing with, you're on the right path, at least mentally so far. So the Eight of Swords is actually the predecessor to the Nine of Swords that we were just talking about, obviously, because 9, but why that's relevant is, remember how I was talking about the Jupiter ruled decan of Gemini? Well, this is the Jupiter ruled decan of Gemini, so that is fun. And also, here, let me get my wheel out so I can just show you guys really quick. It's just easier with the visual aid. So we have my handy dandy decan wheel. And if we look at Gemini, we got right there, this is the 8, 9, and 10 of, I was gonna say of Gemini, of Swords. So first we go from Saturn, right? From Taurus, we go Saturn's decan of Taurus. We've reached the limit of material sustainability. We go into Gemini, we start exploring all of these other options. And it's kind of cool too, because even though this is not necessarily related to Taurus, it's kind of just the earth element, generally speaking, and then different people and different hierarchical stations relate onto that. But still, you know, Taurus is an earth sign, and we are talking about stagnant earth energy. And so Taurus seems as good a candidate as any for the, to be honest, I do often associate the Knight of Pentacles with Taurus, but not always. It's court cards are more iffy like that. And just as a general rule of thumb for anybody who's like learning tarot or is interested in my take on that, court cards are really more about relational hierarchies than they are about specific zodiac signs. Like, we have a lot of astrological correspondences in the deck without including the court cards. The Golden Dawn has a very specific, complicated system that I don't think does anybody any favors. And actually, when anyway, never mind, maybe that's not relevant. But the point is, I think it's more helpful to think about them as the 4 elements times the 4 elements and like social relativity in a element than it is to think about any one zodiac sign in particular, particularly because, well, to be frank, court cards are really helpful in that they very often represent people in the situation, like people other than you. And they can also represent like facets of you, right? Because the people that we interact with kind of trigger internal responses that are, you know, I don't know, equal to that external stimulus. But like, it's helpful to think about them as like, okay, what is the point of a knight? What is the point of a king? What is the point of a queen or a page, right? And then what is the element, and how is that informing the way in which they perform their duties or services? And I think that's important because, like, I think sometimes the astrology can be a bit, how do I say, like people can get really hung up on like, oh, I read in a guidebook that the Knight of Swords is associated with Gemini, but, you know, the person I'm asking about is not a Gemini. And it's like, well, but they have Gemini somewhere in their chart, and like, you know, a lot of things happen, transits, whatever, blah, 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 an individual person's natal chart. You don't necessarily have all of the information. And also tarot is like, one of the great ways that it works is that it can be really informed beautifully by astrology, but it isn't bound to it in the same clockwork way that astrology is bound to like the machinations of the heavens. So when you get Gemini, for example, a card that indicates Gemini, such as, where do I have this guy? Such as this lovely guy right here, the Jupiter ruled decan of Gemini. We're able to take this and segregate it from the heavens and think, okay, like, what is this energy in my life? Like, where am I encountering it in this moment? Like, what does this generally mean to me as a situation? So it gives us this really beautiful language that isn't dependent on like the clock in the sky. You know, it's more related to us and our personal current perspectives. So astrology is very helpful because it gives us this language of like archetypes and situations and corresponding, you know, anything really, corresponding rocks or places or types of people or moods, vibes, days of the week, whatever. But one of the ways that tarot is really exceptional is it's not bound to that. It just uses that, right? It's almost like saying, it's like this kind of thing. So when you start overlaying that onto court cards, I think it gets kind of muddied, particularly when court cards are already very like confusing for a lot of people at first, right? Because this is literally like the characters in your life. And so we're dealing with like a material problem solver who's a little bit stuck right now in their ways. This could also be like, you know, somebody who's stressed out about work, somebody who's stressed about finances and doesn't want to like take the time to like do fun things, feels caged by their little mental prisons and stuff. Anyway, so as I was trying to say, just as like an aside, that wasn't the most eloquent way to say that, but I just, unless a deck very specifically gives you astrology associations with each specific card, like I do that in the nameless one, where I say like, oh, this card represents Cancer. This is literally the mask of Cancer, right? Then I think, it can be beneficial to broaden that spectrum and just, I have my own personal associations with how my deck kind of speaks to me. And I think that each reader sort of builds those over time, particularly if they're asking about the same people over and over and over again. But it's very like, it doesn't have to be that strict, right? Like, tarot is very fluid, and it will speak to you specifically based on what you specifically are most likely to understand and be receptive to. So it's just a little bit less like, I don't know. I kind of lost the train, to be honest. I'm very tired. It's very late for me. But anyway, okay, so we're talking about the Jupiter ruled decan of Gemini. This is like a lot of possibilities, a lot of potential, a lot of opportunities, but none of them are necessarily super tangible, and we want to theoretically entertain the validity of all things, but it kind of makes us feel like paralyzed by indecision or fear or option shock, or even just not sure like if any of these things will actually work, because there are so many, right? And Gemini is a very intellectual sign being ruled by Mercury, and Jupiter is the greater benefic about faith, right? And faith and fact are fun, and they mesh together a bit awkwardly, which is why, Jupiter is in detriment in Gemini. But anyway, so we have this, but we are breaking free of this energy is what I'm trying to say. This is a reverse of that situation, which is kind of fun. And interestingly enough, well, one of the ways I think it's helpful to read reversals is to look back at the card before and think about the lesson of that card that may not have been completely understood. And so when we rush on to the next one, we kind of like we aren't dealing with that energy as proficiently because we haven't learned the lesson of the previous one. And for this is the Seven of Swords, which is the moon's decan of Aquarius, which is very much about sniffing the wind and figuring out like, how do I feel about a situation? How do I think that person feels about a situation? How can I most advantageously, maneuver myself so that I'm on the winning team, or I'm on the team I want to be on? Or like, how do I figure out if I'm going to leave or stay? And so, a lot of the times the Seven of Swords is about subtlety, and it's also about, understanding how to manipulate the situation in your favor. And I use that as a completely neutral phrase. Like, you can do that, of course, to, deceive someone or be one up on someone or steal something or, be nefarious. But there is an art to subtlety, and it doesn't have to be used to nefarious means. And I do find, like, for example, like I've said before, how Aquarius is oftentimes, I kind of link it to like the social pariah, the outcast, the immigrant, the person who doesn't belong. The person who doesn't belong has a lot more to lose by rocking the boat. And in the moon's decan of Aquarius, the moon wants to nurture, nest, be safe. Aquarius is thinking, is fixed, is an outsider, is having to deal with Saturn's limiting presence. And so we're really thinking like, how can I be safest? How can I be fed and satisfied and taken care of in a way that doesn't, like cause me harm and setbacks, right? And I think it's very much like when you feel like you're on the social outs, you have to be 10 times more aware of what effect you're going to have on those around you, because you have a lot to lose and not that much protection. And since the moon is very concerned with safety, and Aquarius, it's intellectual, and with Saturn, it's restricting and limiting, we have this tendency that results to like sniff the wind, right? Just don't commit to things and just see how it's going to go, feel it out, right? Assess the situation before we act on it or say something, be strategic, be careful. So anyway, so that's one thing to keep in mind is, and also one thing that can kind of help with this like fiery temperance energy is like, well, maybe we sniff the wind, right? Maybe there's not a pressure to make a decision exactly. Maybe the pressure is more to just like follow what it feels good, what is exciting in those moments, right? And not necessarily like, put too much stake on it, put too much commitment on it, be prepared to like maneuver and be subtle about that. But also because it's reversed, I do think like, well, the situation is probably alleviating. We also have the 5, 6, 7 of Pentacles. This is funny because we got the 7 of Pentacles in the other deck. Anyway, one of the significations of the 7 of Pentacles is taking your time and knowing that some things you don't have the power to change, and kind of investing your time in the things that you're most able to control and that are most likely to help you. So again, this could just be like a situation that is slow, that is going to take time. We have the reverse King of Swords here. So somebody who's not using their best judgment, maybe who's lashing out or starting arguments for no reason. And then we have the reverse Four of Swords. Sorry, not swords. Four of Wands, which is Venus's decan of Aries. So this is like obligatory parties or putting up with things you don't want to put up with for the sake of just, I don't know, because you feel like you have to, because you want to keep the peace, because you know that you should sort of want to celebrate and be merry, because it's going to be a lot harder a lot of the time, and you want to blow off some steam, but then you know, not really like happy with your surroundings or with the ways in which you can do that. We also have the reversed Ten of Pentacles. Ten of Pentacles is Virgo, is Mercury's decan. Mercury's decan of Mercury sign Virgo. It's like the ability to lay plans that like span generations, right? Like really long, nuanced, optimized systems to the extent that they can like literally just change the scope of everything. One thing that I think about, obviously, in a more mundane level, it's like inheritances, wills, plans for the future, generational success or generational failure. It's, you know, familial help, right? Like the systems around you either being able to support you or not support you. In this case, it's looking like maybe not so supportive. And you know, it can also be about like plans that don't last. Things don't go the way that they should or that you wanted them to. And also we have the Queen of Cups, which is fun because emotional, you know, shoulder to cry on, somebody who wants you to do your best and be at your best, and they want to emotionally nurture and care for you during that process because they believe in your vision, right? Because they believe in your thing. This is something that's really nice about the queens in tarot. Like kings, they run the show. You know, that's the job of a king, is to come up with the plans and live life, manifest their will according to their vision, utilizing the elemental tools that they have. But queens are really nice to get because that means that's somebody who's powerful and on your side, especially when they're upright, right? This is somebody who is pouring their energy into your vision, into what you want to do. Someone who's nurturing you not because they think it'll ultimately pay off for them, like a king would, and not because they're obligated, duty bound, or hired, like a knight, but because they truly believe that you will become something that will be in its own right worth investing time and energy into. The Queen of Cups is especially like this, very supportive, very good. And then we have the reversed Six of Swords, which is about, you know, holding on to the past, being unable to let go, feeling burdened by the way things have been. And we have the upright King of Wands. And actually, this is really funny. Sorry, this is a really funny way to end this because the last two cards are the Ace of Wands and the Eight of Cups. And the Ace of Wands is literally like getting the passion back. That's like the card where you're like, oh, this is good. And then it's got the Eight of Wands or the Eight of Cups right next to it, which is like, but something has to give. Something has to be released. We have to let go of something. Something isn't working. And we kind of got that in the beginning with the Knight of Pentacles too. Like there's something we really feel like should be the way that it is, but it just isn't. We get that again with this Saturn ruled decan of Taurus, right? At the end of the day, there are just some things you can't control, and that's really sad and annoying, and maybe we're struggling to see a way around that given the circumstances. But it's almost like saying with Temperance, you know, when we figure out what will work and we play to that strength and we try to figure out the weaknesses of that and mitigate those and combine these different factors and recognize our limits, but at the same time, you know, strive for what we want, be led by our passions and our desires, we can get that passion back. But it's going to be different, right? This is the Saturn ruled decan of the zodiac sign Pisces. This is about the intangible, spiritual, immaterial boundaries and limitations of the world, right? Like how the world actually works, what is actually important and valuable and substantial after everything that can be taken away from you is taken away from you. And I don't mean that as like a doom and gloom, like that's what's going to happen. What I mean is like no matter what you have, right? One of the key lessons I find that Saturn brings is anything that you materially have, you will lose eventually. Your life, your objects, your power, your wealth, whatever, all of that stuff that you're given can be taken away at any time. So the Saturn ruled decan of Pisces, this is Jupiter's, you know, Jupiter's sign, Jupiter's receptive nocturnal sign. is kind of saying like, well, what do you have left, right? What is there? Things like love, things like faith, things like self-understanding or self-image, things like compassion and connection, right? Things like magic, like spirituality, like the stars above and the ground below, right? Certain things can never be taken away from you. And this is like the pursuit of what those things are, right? Like we're abandoning all of these cups not because they're not valuable, but they're not meaningful in the way that we thought they were, right? Like they're false tokens, they're symbols of success, they're status symbols. They're tokens that don't really ultimately mean anything, right? Because, you work really hard and you try to win the trophy, and then you win the trophy and you realize like, "Oh, hey, I thought I would win this trophy and I would feel validated and I would feel successful and I would feel respected and loved and appreciated. And actually, this is just like a piece of brass, or a piece of plastic or whatever it is. It doesn't actually give me the thing I really wanted, which was, I don't know, respect, which was whatever it was, right? Sometimes people will, for example, try to, I don't know, buy a bunch of cars and hook up with a bunch of women, and they want to be, they want to be loved, right? And they think that being in like a constant state of sexual interaction or having a ton of like, friends that show up at like random parties like signifies that. But at the end of the day, they're like alone because they're missing that connection, because that isn't, they're mistaking the token for the thing, the finger for the moon, right? They thought that if they surrounded themselves with a bunch of meaningless, parties and relationships, they'd feel satisfied. But actually, what they really wanted was a connection, one human being to another, to be seen, to be loved, to be appreciated, right? That's the true thing that we're leaving. We're leaving these tokens behind to go find. And so, the Eight of Cups is one of my favorite cards, honestly, because it really is about finding like what is truly valuable and precious to you, right? Like, when at the end of the day, you have Saturn and Jupiter, and Saturn says, well, you can't have everything. And Jupiter says, okay, well, what do we need, right? What is the thing that we most need to nurture, that we most need to grow? What is the best, most compassionate thing about us, or whatever it is, the situation? So it's kind of fun to get this like very, very watery, cold, removed card right under this like very, very fiery, passionate, literally ace, the foundation of wands. So ultimately, this does kind of look like, okay, so we're going through a time. There's a lot of intellectual hangups. There's a lot of like, how do we relate? A lot of court cards coming up, one very like not so logical, very passionate, very emotional, but maybe not necessarily so active, action oriented, which is something I find with the earth and water suits. The court cards tend to be a little bit, I don't want to say, like a little bit less active, right? Like they don't, like the Queen of Cups is somebody who lends a great deal of emotional support. And that can be like a key thing that can be super important. It can kind of make or break a person, is if someone else like believes in them and is willing to hear them out and like give them space and like see them through the darkest times of this journey. But at the same time, it's not like necessarily the Queen of, I don't know, the Queen of Wands, who will like take you to a party and talk you up to people and like introduce you to people and be super bright and super like, yeah, let's do it. I'm going to go to battle for you. Right. Or even the Queen of Swords, who's very much like got all the hot gossip and like knows how to cut people down and like direct you. Like, you go here, talk to this person, you say this thing. Right. They tend to be a little bit more, well, like receptive, because they're receptive elements. So they make space for you, versus the other two more like carve a space and push you in it. They're a little bit more forceful with their aid, I find. But anyway, so I don't want to get lost in comments. Bruh, that is beautiful. Thanks. I don't remember what that was referring to, but I appreciate that. Gemini, the analysis paralysis can be really annoying to deal with. Oh, totally. Yeah, it can be the worst. Sorry for spamming the chat. No, it's good. It's really good. But this is really deep. You find passion and pursue life and awe, but always know that you're going to part from it anyway to find something new. Exactly. Oh, thank you. The deck and wheel is beautiful, Curry says. This was part of my last Kickstarter for the Children of Ostara, and it's actually available on my site, ziahunt.com. So there you go, for a little plug for anybody who's interested, but no pressure, obviously. But yeah, it was made as a collaboration between myself and Pandora Witch Shop, which is like a Ukrainian-based shop, and they're really, really, really lovely. I hope that I'm able to work with them again in the future. Anywho, so yeah, so this is definitely a journey, and there's a lot about like experimenting, finding out what won't work, finding out like what um what won't work, what will, how to adjust, how to readjust. And then ultimately you go through all of this, right? Let's say you learn how to talk the King of Wands down, and you learn how to let go of your baggage, and you learn how to like see how, sometimes things are not logical, and that's okay. Sometimes we need to be emotionally receptive. We need to see that. And you go through all this stuff, right? You realize how systems are not necessarily going to support you through it, and how you have to be patient with yourself and try to do as much as you can, and like go through it even though it's hard, and try to like release yourself from these like crazy fears or anxieties. And then we're left with these two. And I think that's like really cool, because it's very much we're leaving something behind because we're in pursuit of something new, something better, something more passionate, something that's going to bring you so much more satisfaction, right? And it's a long road there. So I think it's just we have to figure out what we want to keep and what we want to let go of. If there's like specific people that you're working through or working with, then we have to like, be sort of, how do we say, Saturnian about it in a way. And we did get quite a few Saturn cards actually, and be like, okay, here's the sad thing about this combination. Sometimes love is not enough, right? This is another thing about the Saturn ruled decans. Sometimes whatever X thing is, it's not enough. Sometimes it's just can't get you over those chasms. And I don't know the situation. I don't know the relationship. And I'm not even saying that that's necessarily what's going to happen, right? But it's just that there are certain situations where you reach a limit to how far and how fast you can go with a particular person, concept, project, theory, whatever. And we just need to sort of like put it on hold, get some time away, think about what is actually important to us. And I think that process, no matter which decision is made, is really valuable, because it really shows us like, okay, so there's pain here either way, right? There's the pain of working through something that is like stagnant and just taking forever and is unpleasant and boring and not passionate, and hoping that we can like get through the other side and like rekindle the spark that initially was there. And then there's the pain of abandoning it and starting completely over with a new project, a new person, a new home, a new whatever the thing is. And both of those things are going to be painful, right? That's what Saturn says. Both of them are going to be painful and uncertain, and you're not going to know if it works. So you have to take that time to sit and think about what is filling these cups, right? What is false about the situation and what is true? What is the unpleasant that you can deal with? What's the burden that you can bear? The one that you want to carry, right? And I think ultimately, if we go back to those original cards we pulled, we have these lovely guys. And that's really like, we got these cups here and we've got these cups in Temperance. And it's like, yeah, what is the combination that you'll tolerate? What do you want to tolerate, right? Like what feels good to you? What does your instinct say? What does your gut say? Like that's going to be those key factors. We're going to try to rule over ourselves with virtue. And to do that, we have to give, face time to all of these different warring aspects of ourselves. And just get real and get Saturnian and be like, what is on the line? What am I at risk of losing? What do I want to lose? What burdens can I and can I not carry? Okay, so that's that. I hope that was helpful. It sounds hard, but that's Saturn for you. Kind of talking about Saturn anyway. I guess he heard his name and decided to pop up in the chat, huh? The gods do that sometimes. Anyway, so... Okay, so I know that you had a specific question about Saturn and about discipline, and I want to reread it so I know what's going on. Anyway, I hope that was helpful to you. But yeah, Temperance is definitely, I think, a big thing. And actually, I just put him back already, but if I'm not very mistaken, was that your only major arcana card? Because that's like a ton of cards to only have one major. Yeah, I think it was. That's so funny how I just immediately forget stuff. Yeah, that was your only major arcana card for that whole spread, which is like, that was a lot of cards to go through. And I mean, the majors aren't like exactly rare, but they're not rare. So I would have expected to see at least another one. But it really just goes to show like weighing and evaluating your options and your desires and like what you want. So Temperance is going to be, I think, the key card there. And I don't normally make like, it's just like in astrology, like you're always looking for the most powerful planet or like the best, most advantageous spot or the worst spot or whatever it is. And in a tarot spread, it's very similar. Like major arcana cards really get precedent. And then also if you have like a ton of one type of suit, that's really important to notice. If you have like all fire signs, you know, or like all fire cards. And then also if you have like a bunch of one planet talking to you, like we had several Saturns in there. We had Saturns and Jupiters, a lot of. Here's a Venus and Aries, so it's Venus and Mars. That one's Venus and Saturn. This one is Jupiter and Mercury. That one is Saturn and Jupiter. That's just fire at a base level. That's just earth person, an earth person who's stuck in the mud. This is Jupiter again. Yeah, that's just fire person who's like very bright and bold and brash and kind of domineering. So it may also be, I mean, your other court cards here too. Being the queen and the king and the king of fire and all of this, that might also be something that needs to be tempered, like your different the ways in which those relationships are tempered, right? Like no one person can be everything to everybody all the time. It may just be a simple matter of like dispersing your expectations for certain needs being met among certain people. Like, you know, I love my husband dearly, but he's not really very good with words. He's really, really good at listening. And if I have to get something off my chest, like he's definitely good at that. And he's really good at solving like material problems. But if I like want to be, I don't know, like complimented, if I want like an ego boost, right? He's not good at that. And he's not good at like communicating his feelings. So there are just certain limitations that we just repeatedly come up against and that we have to work through. And I just started to learn that like, well, you know, it's not fair to expect him to be like my mechanic and my pep talk guy and my child rearing partner and my all these other things, right? Like there's only so many hats a person can wear. So I think expecting everything from everyone can also be difficult. And I only bring that up because we do have so many court cards and then temperance being the matter. So if we're like workshopping, you know, what is in these cups that we're mixing, right? Is it the different types of roles we have or the different expectations we have, the different people in our lives? You know, something has to be, the ratio has to be shifted over some direction. And eventually that will lead you to some kind of thought that something has to be released, right? And I think that in alchemy, my non sequiturs, in the alchemical process to find the philosopher's stone, right? There's this whole thing about like this suffering and this loss because you're essentially like condensing something into its most pure. So you do lose a lot of stuff along the way. You lose a lot of that, like whatever you start with, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. But the trade-off is it becomes more and more and more potent, right? More pure until it is like the most pure distilled essence. And if you think about this in terms of like making perfume, right? It takes like thousands of roses to make like a tiny little vial, but that vial has like the essence of all of that distilled matter. So, anyway, it's just interesting with the Eight of Cups because we are leaving things behind, but that can also be like leaving behind certain impurities in our expectations in our relationships, right? If we wanted to go the alchemy route, because temperance does kind of make me think of alchemy, just at like a base level. But anyway, okay, so we're done with that one. Okay, so we have, or my question, honestly, the basis of it is that I want to try to make a pop-up astro shop. Oh, cool. And a lot of the assets plus writing plus website isn't done yet. I don't know if I have it in me to finish what needs to be done in time. Isn't temperance the patience card? Definitely temperance is one card that that does indicate the need for patience, but I find two types of patience. There's a Saturnian kind of patience and there's a Jupiterian kind of patience. We have the Jupiter kind of patience where we're like the wisdom and faith to know that you've done what you can and things will grow, but they need time and space to do that. There's this kind of like nurturing kind of patience, like a loving kind of patience. And then there's a Saturnian kind of patience where we're like, push all you want. It's not going to happen, right? It's not time yet. Sorry. It's no, it won't. Sorry. Nope. You know, and there's this very like rock hard place thing versus, and I can't exactly define like the difference for those things, but anyway, yes, temperance is kind of patient, but it is a fire card, so it is pretty active. I think it's patient in the like, as long as we are pushing towards our goal, right? Experimenting, exploring, mixing different, you know, different extremes to try to figure out how to get this perfect thing. I think it's patience with the process is like what temperance is, right? Like faith that it'll work out if we just keep kind of experimenting, right? If we just lead with that fiery Sagittarian energy where we hope for the best, spray and pray, we're going to keep trying until we get it. And we have that kind of patience to sort of keep going. And to try things that are new, right? Because Sagittarius is a mutable sign, and mutable signs are about, the end of one thing and the beginning of another. And Temperance is very much about like transmutation, transformation, synthesis, literally tempering. So, what I find is it's kind of like it's the patience to experiment, right? And not experiment in a mercurial way, but to keep at it, to have faith, to keep going in good faith. A Saturnian patience is like, well, certain things will just only be done when the time is right, and you just can't push or shove or whatever. It's just more like an obstacle, right? So you need patience because great works of structure take time, Jupiter seems more like an internal patience, and I think Saturn a lot of the times is more like an external obstacle that you must be patient in order to subvert, because it's just going to take a while, right? Because Saturn loves toil. So I don't know if that makes sense to you, but I do think that yes, that I do think Temperance can be a type of patience. It's just important to remember that it is a fire card, and fire cards of all the elements are not known for their patience. But I do think that Jupiter gives it that kind of light, airy, good faith thing. So let's pull and faith does take patience. Let's pull some cards for your specific situation. No, not yet. We're not ready. Come on. For your specific situation. Okay. So let me think about this. Okay, so you want to make a pop-up Astro Shop, and a lot of the stuff that you want to have done right now isn't done right now, which, by the way, is so relatable. That's me and all my projects. What I want done right this second just isn't done right this second. Is there a specific reason it needs to be done at a certain time? Because, some things that just take time. I'm going home in a week, so I have a week deadline. Saturn and Aries, where you make something good ASAP, rush, yeah. How is that with discipline? Let's see what the tarot says. Okay, let's see. So I'm going to ask for a general card for like generally as the tarot sees the situation. So I do have a question. So you say you have 1 month to have the shop, but then no more chances of real people clients. And I wonder, so I get that the housing situation is changing. You're going home, so you're moving locations in a week. So you have a week deadline. Okay, so you want to do like a physical pop-up shop, like in the location that you're in right now. But the digital stuff isn't, in the Philippines. Okay. So, and then you want like a website to like market it and stuff. Because I wonder, like, if you only have a week to do it, is it like for like some kind of festival or like some kind of, because why not just like do a astrology pop-up shop where you're gonna go to instead of before you leave? But yeah, let's ask it's in a club. Oh, that's cool. Okay, let's see what the general situation is. How does the tarot see it? Oh, that's funny. Okay. Okay, club that you can access. My brother has a queer club that I can access. Okay, cool. All right, so we have the 5 of Swords, we have Judgment, and we have the reversed 6 of Cups. So this was part 1 of what I was going to ask as more questions, so we'll just start there. I can speak in my native tongue there. Yeah, that would be helpful, huh? This is a very Saturn and Aries vibe, isn't it? Like trying to do so much, like so fast, and kind of not knowing like how to do it or whatever. All right. Let me think about what I want to say here. So the 5 of Swords definitely has this connotation of like a rushed energy. Well, maybe that's the wrong word, rushed. So this is actually the same card we got before in the beginning, one of Venus's messages to us. This is the Venus ruled decan of Aquarius again, but in Litha it's a bit different. I want to pull out that other card really quick just to like show you. Imagine this is like these two guys duking it out over this peahen right here. That's like what's going on in Ostara. She's like, I rejected both of you. But this is like the fight that just preceded it. Just like imagine this this narrative, right? Like these two little, in this case, they're pheasants, but let's just pretend they're peacocks. These two pheasants are duking it out because they're like, I'm going to win her. No, I'm going to win her. I'm going to have what I want. I'm going to have what I want. And then she's over here like, I'm not choosing either of you fools because I have something better in my future. There's just something better waiting for me. So this is kind of like a different point in that Five of Swords narrative where we're dealing with ideals versus reality and we're really fighting to do what we want to do, but there's also like maybe not do what we want to do. Maybe it's like we're fighting to maintain or fix the perspective that we have, right? A lot of the times we have these ideological conflicts. We think, Aquarius fixed, air, fixed thought. We have this thing in our mind, this vision, like it must be this way or it can't be anything at all. And it gives us this kind of false binary of like yes or no, black or white. I think Aquarius in general has this tendency where they zoom out to such an extent where it's like this is always bad and this is always good, and there's like this rigidity there that Saturn often demands, that wants things to be very like yes or no, pass fail kind of a situation. And then we have Judgment too, which so in tarot, Judgment was originally going to be just like the energy of fire, but then when Pluto became a thing, Pluto was overlaid onto it, which is kind of fun because it's like initiation, transforming. This also being a major arcana card is like, yes, you are meant to think about this thing. You're meant to have this preview, to have this urgency, to have this rush and have this desire. This is something that like is important because it's going to put you on this precipice where we're making a decision that informs the future. And so this is just a general like, okay, how does the tarot see it? And so I almost feel like we're getting really hung up on this like ideal situation where it has to be this. And really it's more of a preview for a long-term plan. And my experience so far with Saturn and Aries, and also just by dealing with my sister who has a Saturn and Aries in the 12th house natally that rules the stellium and Capricorn and like almost everything else. Well, actually her Saturn and Aries in the 12th house absolutely rules her entire chart in some way or another. But something that I have noticed is there's this very like intense need to create a set of rules just like so fast without actually thinking about who those rules benefit and why, and if they need to be there, and if there's not a better, more flexible way that could happen. It's almost like this intense need to be like, it has to be this way because I said so and I don't have time to think about it. That happens a lot. And so I really get this vibe with these two cards in particular, where it's like, yes, we're really, really fighting for this idea. And there might be a case where we a little bit miss the finger for the moon, which I don't know if you're familiar with that saying, but it's like a Buddhist proverb where, you point to the moon representing enlightenment, and then, you mistake the finger, right? The finger is meant to be like, in this case, specifically the teachings of Buddha, right? Which lead you to enlightenment, but are not themselves enlightenment. Just like the finger pointing to the moon is not itself the moon. Anyway, but it's this idea of like missing the forest for the trees or whatever. Like you just, you can't see the overarching big picture, this long tunnel of initiation into this new thing, because we're like fixed up on the place we are right now and where we think it's going to go and all this stuff. It seems like really rigid expectations. And then I say that too because we have the death card reversed, which is like Scorpio, which also has a connection to Pluto, but also transformation. And when it's reversed, it's like two things. First of all, the resistance for change, for transformation. Scorpio's fixed. When I think of fixed water, I think of stagnant water that like festers and breeds life, but also decay, putrefaction. Also, Scorpio is associated with putrefaction. So There's that, but there's also like when it's reversed, it's not that you're undergoing a fundamental transformation of core identity or of self, right? It's not like you're all of a sudden going to switch paths and be somebody completely different. It's more like you're kind of easing, you have to ease in and surrender to what ultimately you're already becoming anyway. Like the core part of that transformation's already started. So then it just becomes kind of breathing into it and figuring it out. I don't know, birth metaphors are really fun and like visceral, but it's sort of like um I don't know. If you imagine like a pregnant woman having contractions and like freaking out, and she's already there though, right? There's no option but to have the child at this point because she's literally in labor in this moment. So then it becomes this mental exercise of like leaning into what we're doing, right? Of like intentionally breathing the way we need to breathe and going the direction we need to go. Saturn in Aries has a really hard time with this. It's just almost like if I had enough power, I wouldn't have to be patient, right? If I could do everything exactly right, if I could like make every call exactly the right way, if I could act fast enough and boldly enough, I wouldn't have to be patient. I wouldn't have to be told no. I could just do whatever I wanted. This is another thing I've noticed with Saturn and Aries and people. It's very much like Saturn is attracted to the power that Aries gives because he falls into this trap of like, if I had enough firepower, I wouldn't need to do any of this other stuff, right? I wouldn't have to be patient and old and decrepit. I could like run a marathon and be one of the youths, and I could just take over the world and do anything I wanted, right? But fundamentally, that's like against Saturn's nature to just like blow out his knees running a marathon. It's more of a long kind of scheming process. And I only bring up Saturn. Saturn is not, I mean, other than this Aquarius card is not necessarily here just because we're asking Saturn. And these are some things that I think about with Saturn and Aquarius, but we'll pull some more cards for like how to go forward from here. But we also have the Six of Cups reversed before I forget to talk about that. This is their Scorpio card, which is fun because, but the other malefic, the malefic Mars that rules Saturn currently. So that's kind of funny. Anyway, this is the Sun's decan of Scorpio. I'll flip it over so you can see the image, but it's got like these beautiful dolphins, this like generational little family, and it's going like back and back in this kind of like hypnotic, dreamlike feel. And so a couple things. The Sun's decan of Scorpio, this is an energy that's very black or white. The malefics, I think, tend to be like that. They're literally extremes, right? That's like why they don't make life happen, because they're too extreme. Mars is too extremely hot, Saturn's too extremely cold. In Mars's decan of Scorpio, in the Sun's decan of Scorpio and Mars, there's this tendency to like over-identify with the boundaries and binaries of like yes, no, black, white, good, bad. There's also this nostalgia, this like deep kind of, I don't know what the word is, like de-evolution into like the recesses of like who you were as a child and how do I explain this? So, you know how Scorpio's got like the scorpion stinger and it goes inside and it destroys from within. This decan is very much like what you get into something is what you put in, is what you put out, and that's informed by like generational cycles of what has been given and what has been taken, what has worked and what has not worked. Scorpio is very instinctual. And what are instincts, right? They're like literally memories that happen and inform our perspective so early on that we take them for granted, right? They create like expectations that we don't even know we have. Our instinctual reactions are the reactions we're taught to have. The ones that when we were younger, maybe they were coping mechanisms, maybe they were, our knee-jerk reactions kind of tell us a lot about like where we're coming from. And Scorpio just kind of strikes without thinking. It's a very instinctual beast, the Scorpion. And so a lot of the times when you see the Six of Cups, it's like nostalgia and childhood, because really what it's pointing to is like these systems of instinctual reaction that we've developed and had as coping mechanisms, as defense mechanisms since we were children, coming up and informing our future decisions and expectations and what we're ready and willing to give others. It's almost like, imagine you have these cups, right? And your caregivers are pouring liquid into this cup to like feed you and to be part of you in that intimate scorpionic way where it's like fused to the essence of your soul. And they keep pouring in this liquid into this cup. Well, if that liquid is poison, or if that liquid is the nectar and ambrosia of the gods, is really gonna influence what you end up becoming, right? What fuses to your soul and what your knee-jerk reactions are. And then what you were given, what's in this cup, whatever it was, that's what you have to pour into the cup of others. So this is the poison in the scorpion sting, right? This is the thing that you inject into the relationships and expectations and future that you have. So when you have the Six of Cups, it's hard because in tarot, it has this very nostalgic, very soft kind of vibe. But really, it's like nostalgia is a shield. And Mars is all about the shield. And you don't need a shield unless you're expecting for an attack and you're trying to defend yourself against something. And so it's whatever you're instinctually trying to defend against. This is like what the shield of nostalgia is trying to protect you from, right? Is this like, oh, remember better days, and remember when times were simpler, and remember when I knew what I wanted, or I didn't know what I wanted and I didn't care. And there's this very like disintegration or like putrefaction into your lowest kind of, no, I don't mean lowest in like a judgmental, like your worst self. I mean just like your most early self, like your most vulnerable self, right? Like remember the days when we didn't think about this, we felt this certain way. So it's very interesting because to get this reverse, we have this like stuck in the past. And based on what context you've provided me already, the thing that comes to my mind is like, well, you know, in the past, maybe you felt like it had to be yes or no, black or white immediately right now. If it wasn't this way, it wasn't ever going to happen. And I wonder if maybe, I mean, we'll see, because we'll ask more questions for the cards too, more follow-up questions. But one thing that comes to my mind is I wonder if it's like, well, whatever this ends up being, like maybe we throw things at the wall and we see what sticks as like an experimental trial, right? You do as much as you can and then you call it a day and then you go to the club and with your pop-up shop and you say, okay, who's coming, right? Like, do I get anyone? And then instead of viewing it as like, this is final, do or die, yes or no, and this is going to be some kind of like big thing that informs like what kind of precipice I'm standing on for my future and if I can do anything ever again, or if it's going to be an ideal perfect case, we just think, well, this is the first of many pop-up shops that I'll try to do throughout the thing. This is the first of many experiments and many kinds of things that are just going to inform and like kind of fine tune this, I don't know, longer journey or longer path. It seems very, oh, happy Saturn return to Carlisle. Yeah, totally. So yeah, Scorpio seems very black and white, and that it's reversed, and that we've got this very like idealistic kind of like duel here. Feels like maybe it doesn't have to be. Like maybe this can be more about like a learning curve than an actual outcome or effect. And I'm wondering too, because like I happen to know, right? Venus in Virgo is a pretty difficult position, and I'm saying that based on what I know about your chart and what I know about my chart. And I think that Saturn and Aries with that combination is like wanting everything to be perfect the first try right away. And I don't know that that's a super realistic expectation. Like, I think there are going to be things that fall through the cracks, but I think that that information is what you need to get. Like, that's going to be like the real big thing that helps you inform what's going on in the future, right? So maybe in the past you've had great successes or great failures, and maybe that's this kind of like subconscious, like it should work this way based on my expectations and my experiences and my past results or whatever. But this is really more like we're coming into a new thing now, right? Judgment is the second to last card before the world, and the world is related to Saturn, and Saturn is like, it is what it is. This is just the reality. I always describe the world as being, you know, the solid ground upon which the fool leaps off into the unknown and upon which he must ultimately land, right? It's like, yeah, the fool, which, you know, comes after or before the world, depending on your perspective, is about this like great spontaneity, this like the soul incarnate in a new journey again. And, you know, sky's the limit, right? But it's like, well, sky's the limit based on how far you were able to leap off of the solid surface, you know? So Saturn always comes back around to remind us like, hey, how far you can go depends on how far you've been. And there's this really cool, like, I don't know, give or take or push and pull where every time you leap, you get a little bit higher and a little bit further, and it gets more and more and more grand, right? But it's not just one thing. It's a cycle. It has to build off of itself. It builds momentum just like anything else. So as far as the pop-up shop thing, maybe we'll ask for, if this is a situation, so I don't know, this like landscape is hard to keep stuff in. Okay, maybe we'll ask for like situation, maybe we'll do like outcome advice. And yeah, and see what comes from that. Oh, I didn't know you could do a message redacted. Okay. Okay. So we have some situation where we have the upright Queen of Pentacles. So we have somebody who's willing to invest physical time, space, assets, whatever in you and what you want to do, which definitely does. Oh, don't worry about it. There was a typo. Yeah, I make typos constantly. But anyway, so don't even worry about it. But yeah, so we have somebody who's willing and able to invest some material resources into your vision. This does sound, I mean, you said your brother offered you a space at a nightclub or something like that. So that sounds very likely to be him, somebody who's supportive and there for you. And then we also have this reversed, also my dog just escaped and I'm going to open the door because I don't know what she's doing. I left her in my room, but Magic, are you out here? Miss Magic, come here. Okay, maybe she didn't escape. Maybe she's just making a lot of noise. Sorry about that. I was worried she was getting into the trash. I left her in the room, but anyway, I left her in the other room so she wouldn't whine so much. Poor thing. It's okay. I'll be there soon. And she has a ton of toys and she'll be fine. So anyway, what was I talking about? So we have somebody who's offering like material resources, benefit, you know, who's nurturing, who wants to help you and help you do the thing you want to do, which is great. And then we have the reversed Six of Coins, which is like a little bit less great, to be honest. But this is like feeling like there's not enough help, there's not enough material resources, there's not enough time, which, you know, time is a material resource. It's like a thing you have or you don't have. I mean, it's like the least material of the material resources, but yeah, there's only so many hours in a day, right? So you have to spend them a certain way. I think thinking about, you know, time is not money, but making money takes time, right? And we spend our time on things. So, sorry, I need more water again. So the Six of Pentacles is a Taurus card. It's the moon's decan of Taurus. It's this middle decan right here. And the moon is already exalted in Taurus, so that's great. And this is this kind of like big, abundant boom of fertile aid, right? This is like all the natural things helping and supporting each other and being super safe and awesome. So like little cardinals are resting in his antlers and it's all snowy and it's like they're all getting through it together and it's a lot of help and it's a lot of fun and nurturing and abundance. And when it's reversed, we kind of feel stuck. We kind of feel like, oh, there isn't a lot of help or there isn't a lot of, you know, information. There's not enough time. There's not enough resources. I don't know what to do. And then we have this Nine of Wands. And okay, so the Nine of Wands is another moon card, actually. It's the moon's decan of Sagittarius. Another middle decan for the moon guy right here. That's this decan right there. So the moon's decan of Sagittarius is really interesting because this is like, okay, a Sagittarius we've talked a little bit about before. It's the archer, it's temperance, it's shooting for the stars. It's, you know, this righteous warrior who's going to like fight for the truth and the good and all these things. And then as we get to the moon's decan, right, we kind of start running out of arrows. We start running out of steam. We start realizing, hey, I can't protect all of the things I want to protect and do all of the things I want to do and say all of the things I want to say. So what is really truly important? Like what needs to be carried out and what needs to be nurtured and protected and nurtured. I already said nurtured, but what needs to be protected and cared for. So oftentimes, and the nine is, you know, pretty close to the end of the wand's journey. We're starting to feel burnout, feel fatigue, feel like okay, we don't have enough steam to get, you know, everywhere we need to go. So we're going to start cherry picking, right? Like what can we save from this? What's good enough, you know, what needs to be enough to make this thing a reality. So sometimes I like to say like the Nine of Wands is, you know, the jaded warrior who's still looking for the good fight. They're still wanting to champion a good cause, but they're tired, they're worn down, they're injured, and they just need to feel safe, right? They need to find something that they can really invest their whole self into, knowing that it's not enough to like do a whole nother journey, right? Because we're at the nine. The nine is pretty much like things are manifested as they are. There's not that much we can do at this point. So when it's reversed, we have the situation where it's like we're not seeing any possible thing, right? And a lot of the times it's not because it's not there. It's just that we're very tired. We're very tired and fatigued, and a lot of stuff kind of looks hopeless at this point. And mostly I find that the answer to uprighting this energy, to, rebalancing it, is saying, okay, we can't protect everything, we can't champion everything, and we can't make everything exactly perfect. So what can we do? What do we have the willingness and the ability to do? Carlisle told me something. I think she learned from someone else about this, like, I forget what she calls it, but it's like a ratio, literally like the temperance cups, right? It's a willingness to ability ratio. You need to have a certain amount of willingness and a certain amount of ability to like make a thing happen. And and also like people around you, right? The resources around you. Like somebody might be super willing to help you, but do they have the ability? Somebody might have the ability, but do they have the willingness? And then it becomes pouring that amount of effort into kind of fixing the one that they don't have, right? So if somebody doesn't have the willingness, but they have the ability, how can we make them willing, right? How can we sweeten the deal? How can we make this worth their while? If someone has the ability, or somebody has the willingness, but they don't have the ability, then it's like, okay, how can we add ability? How can we give them more resources or gain more resources? Or how can we like put our minds together and make it work? So we have these kinds of, this kind of is like the situation as you've described, right? You do have people willing to help you, but you have a lot ahead of you and not necessarily a lot of like, I got that 9 of Wands with my nameless one order, I think. Oh, cool. Yeah, my husband usually is the one who puts those in there. Isn't that neat? Anyway, so let's think of an outcome. Let's see what the tarot thinks is going to happen with this pop-up shop endeavor. And then I probably got to go because my dog is whining for me. I feel bad. Oh, I do have some things popping up. Yep. Okay. Hey, you guys. No. If that's important, we'll do it again. But I'm like, we got too many of the samey guys in there. I will say, though, to be fair, Justice is probably fair in there. But these, yeah, some of these are from the other ones. So I'm going to just shuffle again. Also because I got distracted by my dog's whining and also reading the comment. So I always, I don't do that, like, reshuffles a lot. But if I do lose focus or if, like, cards pop out that were definitely, like, a spread that we already did, then I sometimes will just shuffle the deck and I'll tell the cards and be like, look, if it's important, show up again. If it's really, truly, actually important, you show up again. Sometimes I do. Actually, I would say, the statistic is made up on the spot, but I would say about 50-50 they do show up again. At least like 1 or 2 cards from the previous ones. But okay, so we said I'm there because my brother will get married and this is actually the side quest, LOL. Yeah, so already putting a lot of stake into a side quest is maybe, that's such a Saturn and Aries thing to do though, right? Is to try to have both quests be main quests. Anyway, but let's see how this will go. The outcome of Curry Star's pop-up astrology shop. Yeah, okay. We did get one of them again. Sorry, I just said that usually happens, but it does. It does happen a lot. So, and then the hidden card at the back is the 2 of Wands, which is important. We got the 3 of Wands last time. And so, okay. Anyway, so the 2 of Wands reverse is being like, probably we're going to end up going back to the drawing board. We're going to learn a lot of things throughout this experience, which you're actually going to need to do in order to like make things like this happen again in the future. And we're going to start to like release these expectations or these mental barriers around it. The High Priestess reverse is really interesting because again, this is a major arcana card. So it's a big overarching theme. And also Judgment and the High Priestess both share the number 2 correspondence with the, because this is 21 and this is 2. And so in numerology, 20, not 21. Yeah, this is card 20. So in numerology, 2 plus 0 is 2, so that puts it into 2, and then this is just the 2 card. And it's funny because you mentioned side quest, and it's literally like 2, right? Like we've got a quest and a main quest, and we're gonna need to like figure out how to prune this back. But Judgment is really interesting as like your first initial kind of pull, because it is saying there's something significant about this desire and about what it teaches you and about wrestling with these concepts that's really important. And so because we asked Saturn, the taskmaster, basically, like what does this mean in the discipline of it? This is going to be a story of like things not going the way that you want and having to get back up anyway and think about, what did I learn in the future? How can I do things differently? Like try something, anything, just to say that you've tried it, stand at that precipice, and then reevaluate and prepare for your next cycle. Because there's definitely going to be more that is like in line with that. This is also, actually, my tummy hurts. Sorry, this another thing with Uranus going into my 6th house, where I guess my Mars is being less bona fide by the benefics than it usually is, because lately I've had all this stomach trouble, and my lot of fortune is with Virgo, and there's all this stuff about, if you're gonna have problems, maybe you'd have stomach problems. And I was like, no, I never had stomach problems. But Uranus went into the 6th house, and now all of a sudden I'm having all of these stomach problems. It's really annoying. But anyway, so I do blame Uranus for that, but sorry, that was hard to focus because it really hurt. Anyway, so yes, the High Priestess is about listening to your intuition. This is also the Moon, listening to your body, listening to your needs, listening to your emotions, what that tells you about what's going on in the situation. Like, this is all information. And when it's reversed, we're saying, okay, for some reason, we're not being receptive to that information. We're trying to push it aside, push past what we can comfortably bear, or push past some emotion that we really need to actually deal with and figure out, like, why we feel the need to be pressured in this kind of way, in this very Saturn and Aries kind of way, like what that says about our mindset and what that says about where we're going and what we need to do going forward. So we're going to have to figure out how to upright this High Priestess, which is one of the things that I really like about the Nameless one, because if we were using the Nameless one, I would just advise you to do the sigil. That would be a good first step. You have the Nameless one, so you can go ahead and look at the High Priestess and light that sigil if you'd like, or activate it in any way. I always go to fire. I'm a very fiery person, but it doesn't have to be fire, but that's neither here nor there. So the thing that we're going to have to learn to take away is how to listen to our intuition, how to listen to what our body is saying, what our emotions are saying, and recognize that as like valid stimulus, right? Like that's really going to tell you something important about the nature of this precipice you find yourself on, about what is attainable and what is just an ideal, what's theoretically the best option and what really is actually could happen the best option, the thing that we need to actually focus our energy, what little we have left, on. And then we also have this nice little 8 of this Jupiter Decan. This Jupiter Decan of, what's his face? The twin guy, Gemini. The twins. The Jupiter face Decan of the Jupiter face. Wow, I can't even talk. The Jupiter Decan of Gemini. Jesus Christ. That's not blasphemy for me, because I'm like in a different pantheon, just by the way. Yeah, this is entertaining a lot of ideas, a lot of thoughts, a lot of potentials. Like, wouldn't it be really great if we could, like, running away with the narrative of a thing, running away with the story, figuring, getting too lost in like all of the potentials and possibilities. But this reverse is a good thing, right? It means, okay, so we're starting to figure out realistically what doesn't work, what doesn't feel good. Yeah, sure, maybe this is an option, but is it an option we want? Is it an option that's actually going to benefit us long term? Saturn and Aries in general, I've noticed, he kind of loses his ability to think long term a bit. Like Aries is so fast, and Saturn is not used to thinking that fast. So sometimes we make these decisions that we think are going to be forever big decisions, and then really we're like, oh wow, well that was like totally not even the point. But at the same time, sometimes you have to make these like wild, crazy goose chases to figure out what's actually meaningful about, where you're coming from and where you're going. So as far as the actual success of the pop-up shop, I don't see that being super great. I also don't really see it being a huge loss. I think it's going to be one of those things where the journey is more important in this case. And I don't say that in like a cliche kind of a way. I mean, literally, like, this is going to give you a lot of information about, like, if you do this kind of thing in the future, what can you expect? You know, and like, how can you improve it? And I think that given you have this very limiting time restraint anyway, it's going to be about like focusing on the essentials, right? It would be nice if everything looked beautiful and was pretty and perfect, but how do you get the information communicated as efficiently as possible? And then whatever you have time for afterwards, you can, like, you know, layer it up, make it better. But just do brass tacks right now. This, you know, because Sagittarius is the archer, right? You can do one arrow at a time. Let's say you have 5 arrows left. Where are you aiming them, right? Let's say you're in a battle and you only got 5 arrows. Who are the most important people / obstacles to take out, right? Because those are the ones you want to focus on. And anything else, if you happen to find more arrows later, then we can reevaluate and we can make, you know, decisions from there. But let's assume, since we know our time is limited, and we know that we want to do this thing, that we, you know, commit fully, like Aries likes, but then we just kind of think of it as like, this might be a thing that, you know, we fail a little bit at, and that's going to be really valuable, right? Because that's what Saturn likes. He likes it when you learn from your boo-boo mistakes. Saturn in Aries is really like learning to wear knee pads by skidding your knees, you know? It's like you got to figure out what's vulnerable and what's going to get lost when things start moving really fast. But I don't know. I think it would still be fun and worth doing. I think it's just going to make you think a lot about, like, how these things go and how they could go in the future or not, you know, and if that's something you really want to, like, do, right? Because you kind of have to do it to see what it's going to be like, and you're never going to know until you try. So that's my reading for that. But I would expect setbacks. I would expect less help than you'd like, even though there will be help. I mean, but if it's your brother's thing and your brother's the one getting married, it's very likely that, like, oh, you know, he wants to help you, but he's going to be focused helping other people right now, or dealing with other things at the moment. Or, you know, other people could really very much be willing to help you, but just not have the time or the ability at the moment. But still, I mean, this is like, you know, we've got a limited amount of firepower, so we got to be strategic about how we're going to implement it. And sure enough, you know, after the after the 2 of Wands, where we really think and play around with our ideas or whatever, we also have the 7. Oh, thank you. I got a sale just now. That's like habit. It's a Pavlonian. Every time the Shopify thing goes off in my house, my husband and I both look up and we go, thank you. So just visualize that if you ever buy anything from my shop. Anyway, thank you. Come again, right? So yeah. Oh, what I was going to say is that we have this lovely, the moon deck in Aquarius, right? Like being subtle, figuring out how to get what you need. What's the most important? How do you get what you need? And then go away, go back to your little safe space and plan again for another day. Lots of birds today, don't you think? We got like this bird and that bird and this bird guy right here. We got a lot of air stuff, actually. Although in this spread, let's actually look at it before I just like say stuff, because I'm always, we have a fair amount of stuff, because we've got, let me organize this a different way. We have 2 fire, we have 2 water, 2 air, and 2 earth. So actually this is very balanced. So that's kind of cool. Yeah. I guess if you count these 2 at the end, we have another air and another fire. So we're just ever so much more fire and air than water and earth, but it's pretty well balanced. Anyway, so that's kind of cool. And with judgment upright, I do think this is like, you know, using your best judgment to figure out what you want to spend your time and effort on. And just knowing, like, I think Saturn in Aries really is about the discipline to get up and fall and get up and fall and get up and fall. I mean, he's literally in his fall, right? And Saturn is about, in many ways, can be about what endures. The pain, the burden that we're willing to endure. Are you willing to endure failing at this and getting up again? Because not everything you will be, right? There are some times where, like, okay, like I wanted to be a comic book artist for a huge chunk of my life, and I did it. I got a job for Beneath the Dark Crystal, and in a lot of ways it was really great. But in another way, I felt totally beaten down by that process. just at every turn, at every stage. And at the end of that, I looked up and I was like, you know what? This is not a thing that I can tolerate, getting beaten down and falling up and down and up and down and up for the rest of my life. Like, this is just not the kind of fight I want to be having. It's not satisfying enough. And then I went and found tarot, and I just like never looked back, to be honest. So I think sometimes that's the kind of endurance that we're talking about here. And it makes sense intuitively to me, right? Because we have Mars, the skid knees, and we have Saturn, the getting back up anyway. Like the dusting yourself off and being like, well, I can take another one, you know? So I think that's kind of the vibe I get, right? Is learning how to trust yourself and how to understand the data that your more tender, emotional, intuitive, receptive parts are giving you, and turning that into usable data that will help you with this, with the past of tomorrow, right? Like at the end of this chapter, when you look back on it, the takeaway from it, right? What you have going forward, what's in your cup from now on, in that particular kind of way. So yeah, so that's what I think. I hope that was helpful to you. Yeah, we don't have to finish if your tummy isn't doing well, but thank you for going above and beyond. Oh, anything for you, Curry Star. Honestly, I'm really thankful for the reality check. Really needed to set expectations, so this is apt. Oh, good. Yeah, I don't totally love getting readings that are like, you might be a little overly ambitious, but a lot of these cards are like, I mean, you're balanced. You're thinking about a lot of the different types of things, you know, you're dealing with air and water and earth and fire, and they're all there. But yeah, a lot of them are just like tired. They're just like tired and too much and kind of like not not happy with you. So I do, yeah. So anyway, I'm glad that you appreciate that. So yeah, I hope that was so helpful. Thank you guys so much for coming. It's always more fun when we get folks in the chat, and I really appreciate it. So I will see you all again. My next Patreon live is going to be the first Wednesday of the month, which I'm going to check right now to make sure I don't get that wrong. Which is going to end up being the 6th. August 6th is the first Wednesday of August. So August 6th at 10 o'clock in the morning, I will be doing another Patreon exclusive live. So obviously everyone who was invited this time will be invited next time. I hope to see you there, but no pressure. And then I'm going to start working on horoscopes and the sigil tomorrow. So those should be up soon, hopefully. I do try to get the horoscopes out before the 1st, but I really don't think that's going to happen. It almost never does. They usually end up coming out like sometime closer to the 3rd or 4th. So now I guess that's just my new normal schedule, right? Sometimes I manage the 2nd, but I very rarely manage the 1st. Anyway, so I hope that you guys are all looking forward to that if it is relevant to you. And then I also do have some plans for another commission preview coming up. Oh, which is another thing. Anybody who's watching this video after the fact, my commissions as of this moment are still available. I think I have like 8 slots left. I was only going to accept 18 commissions, and we've got 9. So if my bad fast math checks out, and we got, I don't know, a little less than half, I think, filled. So anyway, so if anybody wants a commission, please email me at ziahunt@gmail.com. And yeah, I think that's all the shameless plugs I have time for this evening. Yeah, okay, so thanks again. See you soon. Bye.